I was 6 years old when I first saw Tron. Let me tell you, that shit slapped, and my brain was not ready nor developed enough to understand what I had just witnessed. What I did understand, however, is that I had just watched something truly unique. Something I couldn't see anywhere else. See, my dumbass 6-year-old self didn't know anything about films, considering I was just a dumb baby thing. So, I somehow had no understanding of the cultural impact the film had. Nor did I understand what it meant that it would get a sequel the year after that. I watched Legacy, and my life changed. I once again saw something wholly unique, something I couldn't and wouldn't see in anything else for the rest of my life. I mean, these f***ers caught lightning in a bottle twice. For my stupid now 7-year-old brain, this film was crack. It dominated my every thought and cemented itself as one of the most formative pieces of media I had ever witnessed. I watched the film probably once a day, multiple times on tougher days. The Spin Master toys? I had every one. An animated TV show, you say? Give me all that shit, 20 times over. I lived Tron. I'll discuss this in more detail during the Legacy section, but I itched for a third film in the franchise for years, following every cryptic piece of news until silence. However, in January 2023, a light tore open the sky and carried me towards it. A voice rumbled from the clouds. You want to know what it said to me? 2 words. With Tron Ares' release just around the corner, I wanted to do something I've never, ever done in my life. Talk about Tron! In researching this video, I realized there's a lot more Tron media than I had actually realized, but I will talk about all of it. Starting with the original classic that started it all, going over comics and video games, sequels and spin-off shows. I will cover every piece of Tron media that has been released in the definitive Tron video. You ever heard of a little game called Pong? Well, Steven Lisberger, my one true love, had, with that and the wider arcade boom, he began forming an idea. One that would soon enough change the world. Around that time, this hunk saw a toothpaste commercial which used a CGI demo reel from Maggie. Quoting Lisberger, I saw a real-time animation for the first time. A little electronic beam going beep 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 across the screen. To me, it was living animation. I was thinking animation at the time. When I saw that crude little character in the Pong game, I realized that by melding these two ideas, I could use computers to tell a story about video games. It seemed like a natural marriage. So the mad genius started thinking about an animated character, a warrior, who lived inside an electronic computer system. He originally planned to make a fully animated film using this newly developed technology, and in 1977, Lisberger founded the aptly named Lisberger Studios. He did this both to fund his fever dream passion project and as a backup in case the studio wanted nothing to do with it. The first production under the Lisberger Studios banner was a 2D animated TV special called Anime Olympics starring... wait, Billy Crystal? Mike Wazowski? The only reason I bring this up is because from the studio logo, you can already see how Tron was Lisberger's primary motivator, and with the help of Donald Kushner, his producer, Lisberger started shopping the idea around to various studios. I mean, imagine a film set in a digital world, one that looks like it and adheres to all the rules and... Yeah, no, that sounds really expensive, honestly. Also, how would you even make this? I mean, these computers, they can't make a movie. Lisberger was rejected time and time again. Realistically, that's the problem with having such genius that is so far ahead of its time. Those you try and convince will call you crazy for it. And crazy, Lisberger was. I mean, just look at this fella. Wow. Him and Kushner needed to find a studio either crazy or desperate enough to produce it. Sir, we're sinking. We haven't had a real success in a long time. I mean, Pete's Dragon, the Black Hole, the North Avenue.
Don't talk to me about the North Avenue regulars, you cheap son of a bitch. We're dying, Johnny boy. We only got a couple moves left. We need something, no, someone. Truly crazy.
Disney bought in. Although they didn't necessarily think the idea would change modern cinema in the way Lisberger and Kushner did, the allure of making something which pushed the boundaries of technology was undeniable. Lisberger rewrote the script into something that blended the CGI animation with live action, and over the next few months, he would amass a team of like-minded nerds like Jean Giraud and Sid Mead, as well as a slew of developers and software engineers to help realize his dream. See, Lisberger, in his unbridled genius, believed computer guys were warriors who would head the future, meaning a lot of them were won over by such an idea. The concept was so far out, and the technology so infantile, that they had to approach 4 different CGI studios just to attempt prevising. It was then that they developed the technique to utilize age-old filmmaking methods to simulate CGI effects and create a look and world which still looks beautiful to this day. Half the reason the film still looks as good as it does today is because of the approach taken.
We were taking computer animation and letting it stand on its own. We weren't trying to make computer animation mimic reality. And the job was then to make reality, the actors and the sets, look like the computer animation.
This venture allowed them to previs scenes, including the light cycle sequence, which wowed Disney enough to greenlight Tron, finally. With the budget set at $17 million, or around $60 million today, the film began casting. Harrison Ford was considered for Flint, and Peter O'Toole for Tron. He even stated that he would die happy knowing he had Tron etched next to Lawrence of Arabia in his grave. Ironically enough, he was not chosen, probably because no one could be bothered to watch the whole of Lawrence of Arabia to fact check whether he was actually a good actor. No. Instead, Bruce Boxleitner was chosen for the titular character and Jeff Bridges for, well, essentially God. So, they got the right dude. Tron follows Kevin Flynn, a software engineer, hacker, and arcade owner who created games for the tech corporation Encom. After being fired from Encom, Flynn suspects that the CEO, Ed Dillinger, is stealing his code. So with the help of his former co-worker and possibly lover, Alan Bradley, and his lover, Laura Baines, Flynn is able to break into Encom, where he essentially transports himself into a new digital world, the grid. From here, the film, visually at least, goes off the rails. The story itself is quite straightforward. Flynn is detained by recognizers and must reach the Master Control Program, or the big bad guy, with the help of Tron, who is Alan Bradley's security program, and some other characters he meets along the way. One thing I love about this film is the characters. Aside from Flynn and Tron being extremely charming, Ram was always a favourite of mine growing up. He's an innocent program who is just kind of lumped into this adventure, and he is the chillest dude alive. Well, not for that long. His death didn't hit as hard on a rewatch, but as a kid, it fucked me up. I just loved the little brother dynamic he had with Tron and Flynn. I also had no idea what this meant when I was younger, but he's an actorial program for some big insurance company, meaning when he dies, there is some insurance company absolutely going down the drain, and that's hilarious. Another thing I love is how effortless the world building feels. I mean, this film uses computer jargon before it was even normal to own a personal desktop, so words like program, user, master control program, deresolution, even concepts like corporations fighting over personal data, something extremely relevant today, they just didn't mean that much to audiences at the time. The stuff I love, however, is the virtual insults Lisberger created, such as null unit and bitbrain. It's especially hilarious because with the current AI uprising, people are coming up with slurs like clunker and copper blood, so Tron predicted everything. I also quickly wanted to touch on the soundtrack by Wendy Carlos. Carlos is in every right a legend to an extent I can't even begin to capture. Not only was she one of the first openly transgender public figures in her field, but her influence over electronic music and synthesizers paved the way for electronic music as we know it today. She composed the soundtracks for A Clockwork Orange and The Shining, which are great, and just as influential and recognizable as the rest of her work. With that being said, the soundtrack is not very good. It definitely has its bangers, but it was a little too experimental to fully fit the vibe of the film. It blended synthesizers with orchestra in a very unique way that reminisced Carlos's whole career, but honestly, it sometimes just sounds like a mess of noise. Tron was supposed to release in the Christmas of 1982. Instead, it ended up releasing in July, meaning it now had to compete with a couple of small films, you know, like Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, E.T., Blade Runner, and Poltergeist. The Thing, what else? Conan the Barbarian, Mad Max 2. Yeah, okay, you get the gist. It didn't do badly per se, but it wasn't the box office darling Disney hoped it would be. Critics praised it for its computer-generated imagery, with resident The Thing and Blue Velvet hater Roger Ebert calling it a state-of-the-art movie, and going on to say it's brilliant at what it does, and in a technical way, maybe it's breaking ground for a generation of movies in which computer-generated universes will be the background for mind-generated stories and emotion-generated personalities. While Ebert also praised the fact that it was a story about machine nature as opposed to human nature, many other critics as well as audiences found that to be the film's biggest detractor. Although that is kind of exactly what the film was going for, it's clear to see why there was a disconnect between audiences, considering they were coming fresh off of, Wrath of Khan and fucking E.T. Something worth noting is that the film was famously snubbed at the Oscars for the special effects category, as the Academy thought they cheated by using computers. The irony is, the special effects geniuses who worked on Tron ended up training people who would go on to work at ILM, Pixar and Blue Sky, and realistically, Jurassic Park wouldn't be what it is without Tron. The Matrix most likely wouldn't be what it is either. And Pixar was birthed in a Disney that Tron helped reshape. Avatar is basically Tron on an alien planet. I mean, this film predicted and inspired technology to an extent that I doubt even Lisberger foresaw. Virtual avatars, synthesized worlds, data theft, AI replacing workers, biodigital jazz, man. Tron gave 80s audiences a sneak peek into the world we currently live in. It's messy, sure, but it's a wonderful little adventure film that is timeless and will only continue to become more and more relevant as time passes. 2003. A strange time where cargo shorts and those weird elastic bands shaped like animals were cool. One where the only Marvel film that was out that year was the Fever Dream Hulk movie, and there was not one but 2 Matrix sequels coming out. Lord of the Rings was coming to an end with The Return of the King, the Iraq War just began, and MySpace was released. What a time to be alive. More important than any of that noise, however, was an event that would change the course of human intelligence, interaction, surveillance, something that would ultimately redefine the human experience. A Tron video game. No, not an arcade game, but a full first-person shooter game. Despite what the name would suggest, Tron 2.0 is a video game adaptation of the film, which follows the same story with the same character. Wait, what? It's actually a sequel? Shit. As the name would suggest, Tron 2.0 is a sequel to the classic that tells an original story with new characters. That alone makes this game so interesting, since it's not an adaptation or a movie tie-in. No, this is a video game sequel to a movie about entering a video game which was originally supposed to be followed by a new film that would be a sequel to it. It's a little confusing, but it definitely feels characteristically experimental for Tron. This game was published by Disney Games, which was then called Buena Vista Games, and developed by Monolith, who are known for Blood, No One Lives Forever, the Fear games, and most recently, the Shadow of Mordor games. They're a legendary development studio, and are actually currently working on a Wonder Woman. Oh. With Monolith behind the wheel, Disney was convinced they'd have a surefire hit, so they brought back Bruce Boxleitner, my love, and Cindy Morgan for voices, Wendy Carlos for the soundtrack, and even Sid Mead for an updated light cycle design. Considering how the release of the film turned out despite their hopes of success, they put all of their eggs in the neon basket, making dedicated toys, ports to Xbox and flip phones, I don't know, and even a comic series to follow on from the game's story. So how did it go? Well, it was released in August of 2003, and stop me if you've heard this before. It was praised by critics for its boundary-pushing art direction and sound design, yet criticised for its lackluster story. Although it found its fans, critics also considered the gameplay to be unspecial and outdated compared to contemporaries of the same year. Speaking of, what else came out that year? Oh shit, not this again. Knights of the Old Republic, Simpsons Hit and Run, Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, and Tony Hawk's Underground. Okay, that's actually not too bad. I mean, they're all great games, don't get me wrong, but I'm sure it could compete. Oh wait, Silent Hill 3, Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne, fucking Call of Duty. Alright, Disney, you clearly do care about Tron as a franchise, but my god, if this is the landscape, just release it the year after. Oh, okay, yeah, no, fair enough. I've owned this game on Steam for a couple of years, but I've never actually played it until now, so how does it hold up? Well, before I answer that question, I have to quickly mention the team at LDSO for the amount of work they've put into preserving this game. After the game's less than satisfactory financial performance, Buena Vista stopped supporting it after just a year or two, and LDSO formed to develop the Killer App mod, which not only added a bunch of features and quality of life improvements, but also makes it so you can play this in 16:9 and up to a 4K resolution. I had an issue with the mod and tried my luck with emailing one of the developers, assuming I'd never get a reply considering how old it is, but I indeed got a reply within the same day, so the extent to which they love and support this game cannot be undersold. Now, with that out the way, let's talk about the Set 20 years after the events of Tron, we play as Jethro Bradley. Yes, Jethro Jet Bradley, who is the son of Alan Bradley and Laura Baines. Laura has passed away at some point between the film and the game, which, alongside with Jet's reckless attitude, has caused a rift between the father and the son. Jet, who sports the most 2000s look imaginable, complete with a chin strip and spiky hair, also works at Encom, which is failing and being sold off to a company called FCON. Some of the FCON goons kidnap Alan, and as he's telling Jet this, an experimental AI sporting Laura Baines' voice, named Mathria, digitizes him into the grid, leading to one of the hardest title cards. I'm not even joking. After this, Mathria reveals that the chief of security at FCON, Thorn, has digitized himself and has caused a spreading corruption. Jet is captured by the system's security program, Colonel, whose name is a smart little double entendre, but spared under the recommendation of a mysterious program called Mercury, voiced by Rebecca Romijn, who you might know from playing Mystique in the Fox X-Men films. Jet is put through the light cycles where he will, well, lose a bunch of times due to the fuck-ass enemy AI, but then eventually win and escape with the help of Mercury. Together they find Mathria and must escape as the server is corrupt to the point of requiring reformatting, leading to Mercury's, well, spoilers, death. The three found an unfinished piece of code, interestingly named the Tron Legacy Code, which was sort of an update of Alan Bradley's Tron program intended initially to protect Mathria. Travelling to the net, Jet finds a compiler program who can finish the code and, well, compile it into Mathria, doing so just as Thorn shows up to destroy her. However, in conveniently bad timing, Jet is contacted by the anonymous guest user who had both guided him around and sent Mercury to protect him. Guest reveals himself to be Alan Bradley, as well as telling Jet that the legacy code is glitched, so the prime directive is to kill any user on the grid. How unfortunate. In the real world, the FCON goons for some reason send Alan into Thorn's server to test it, so Jet helps Colonel reach Thorn, and before Colonel can kill him, you engage into a boss fight with Colonel. And after defeating him, Thorn tells you how to enter the FCON servers and he just kind of dies. You then enter the FCON server where these little pricks called data wraiths are being used like hackers to steal information from a worldwide network to be basically Facebook. Also, at some point it's revealed Mercury is still alive but had her programming reset, but she helps you, and then her and Jet have some implied romance. Anyway, to defeat you, the three main FCON goons are digitized, but Alan removes a correction algorithm just as they're entering, turning them into this weird Cronenberg monster, which you have to fight as a final boss in the digitizing beam. Once you've killed the shit out of them, it just kind of ends. Like, I'm not joking, you get back to the real world and that's it. The comic carries on the story, but that's kind of it for the game. I'm sure if you haven't played the game, 90% of what I just said doesn't make a lot of sense, so I would recommend playing it as you find out a lot more to bridge the context through things like emails and videos dotted around the levels. Another thing worth noting is the really strange similarities to Tron Legacy, a divided relationship between a father and son, where the son is digitized into the grid in search for his father, the son being sent to the light cycle arena after the big baddie finds out he's a user, the son is broken out of light cycle arena by a female program who is helping a mysterious figure who is then revealed to be the father, the Tron program being updated to be a killer, only to try and resist its programming to fight for the users, and finally the father having to come out of hiding and help his son defeat the big bad guy to exit back into the real world. Interestingly enough, Legacy made this game and the succeeding comic not canon, which makes it even more funny that it basically used this game as a blueprint for its story. I can't really say I loved the story for this game, but I did like it. It lacks a bit of the charming simplicity the original movie had, replacing it instead with more of a story about a troubled son who gets an opportunity to redeem himself and prove himself to his father. I think I would have definitely liked this more had I played it before watching Tron Legacy, as it does deal with a lot of the same aspects a lot better and more emotionally. It was nice to have the story focus more on Alan Bradley and his son though, as opposed to the Flynns, as Alan has always been much more of a supporting character in these films. And I was actually able to get an interview with TronFAQ, one of the main people working on the killer app mod, which really helped to shed some light on the development history of both the game and the mod. I'm gonna insert some stuff from the interview, but I'm also gonna be uploading it in full to the channel, maybe before this video or after this video, I'm not sure yet. But with that said, I do want to talk a bit about the gameplay. First of all, let me start off by saying this game is pretty as fuck. It's a little hard to judge in comparison to contemporaries as I played the killer app mod version, but it has such a unique aesthetic. While playing the game, both because of the visuals but also the gameplay, I was heavily reminded of Deus Ex and System Shock. The grid feels like such a natural evolution from that of the film, with the architecture being more modernized and the color palette much more varied, as well as a lot of levels feeling more populated and lived in. I think this is where the killer app mod really plays a massive role in the longevity of the game, as the ability to play full screen HD just makes levels like the net and my favorite visually, the firewall, really pop off the screen. Did you expect the mod to become as important to the game's legacy as it is, because everywhere I looked was saying that with the killer app mod, that's the definitive way to play it.
Yeah, no, I didn't expect it at all. No, I didn't think it would be that popular. I thought, oh sure, there's going to be people who will use it, but in terms of being recommended so often, no, I did not expect that at all. I'm glad, I'm happy, but definitely didn't expect it. So thanks for letting me know. I actually had no idea that it was that popular.
Honestly, when I first started the game, I felt the same way audiences must have felt watching the film in the 80s, as the main way to upgrade is a subroutine system. It's actually quite simple, as they're just upgrades like armor and new weapons, but for some reason, I found myself so confused, and it did take some time to get used to it. Mind you, this is fully on me, as there's a section of the settings filled with help files if you do get confused. I was just too stubborn to use it. The one downside is that the weapon upgrades just didn't interest me at all. I mean, I'm playing a Tron game. I don't really want to use a sniper or a shotgun. I guess the positive part of that is that the disc gameplay is so tight and addictive that I never felt I needed to use anything else. That is, at least, until I started using the energy claw. My god, a glove that drains the health of your enemies. Wow, it's beautiful. I kind of hated the boss fights in this game, so this thing was a literal game changer. It's actually a little broken in all honesty. When you use it, it uses up your energy, but also refills it for every health point you shave off of your poor enemies. I mean, this thing is brutal, and I sincerely wish every game had it. It also really sucks how Monolith was treated by Buena Vista and later on Warner Brothers, especially considering how unique the game is.
Yeah, oh boy, yeah, that's so unfortunate that Monolith is now closed, Monolith Productions. They closed earlier this year. I hate to say it, but I kind of saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah?
I kind of thought this would happen. Because first of all, they've only been doing movie licensed properties for Warner Brothers, who owned them. Warner Brothers bought Monolith a long time ago, and they only had them working on properties having to do with Warner Brothers, like the Lord of the Rings, right? Those games, the Shadow of Mordor and Shadow of War. And now they were going to do a Wonder Woman game, again, just based on the Warner Brothers property. And I thought to myself, well, if this is all they're going to do now, then what happens when Warner Brothers loses interest in maintaining Monolith Productions' existence, you know? Yeah. So and then also they did a 25th anniversary celebration back in 2019, and a number of Monolith employees left at that time. And I was thinking to myself back then already, it's like, do they know something, you know, that's coming up that we don't, you know? And I'm afraid that's probably what the case was. They already knew the direction the company was going in, that it probably wouldn't be around for too much longer. So they decided to leave at that time, you know, on a high note. 25th anniversary, celebrating their success, and they were very successful. They made some great games, not just Tron 2.0.
As I alluded to before, I wasn't a fan of the light cycle arena, which for some people could be the main attraction. And the boss fights weren't really that much more than just your normal enemy, but with more health. Although I'm not really sure who was expecting great boss fights from a Tron game, but the rest just feels so tight and unique that it really stands out in an industry where even the most unique shooters have been oversaturated. If you haven't played the game, even though I've spoiled some story beats, I would still really recommend playing it because it is so unique. As I said in the 2.0 section, the game was going to be followed by a film which would have presumably continued Jet's story. Although due to Tron 2.0 not making enough money to prove the mainstream desire of a new Tron film, Disney, not wanting to completely let go of the franchise just yet, scrapped movie plans and reached out to 88 Miles Per Hour Studios to make a Tron comic book. Slated to release in early 2004, the comic was called Tron Derezzed, and it would follow Jet as he tries to balance his life in the real world with a murder investigation on the grid. Holy shit, a neo-noir Tron murder mystery sounds so cool. I hope, maybe, I don't know, they still use that idea? Literally just a month before it was supposed to release, however, it was cancelled. This was mainly due to Disney being so annoying and restrictive to work with that 88 miles per hour just kinda wanted to jump ship. This caused the ironically named Slave Labor Comics to acquire the rights and begin working on their own 6-issue comic. The plan was originally to make a prequel to the original film titled The Rise of the Master Control Program, which would have followed Tron's rise to an eventual fall from fame among the grid. However, late into the development of the book, Disney said, fuck that, make a Tron 2.0 sequel. So we got Ghost in the Machine. The comic would begin releasing in 2006 and would end its run in 2008. It took 2 years for 6 issues to be fully released. Okay, this is going to be a weird one. Before I go on to talk about the story, I'm just going to say, read this comic book. There is no guarantee you're going to like it. I mean, many don't, but it's so weird and out there that it definitely benefits going in blind.
There we go.
Okay, guys, I'm not gonna lie. Even after reading it, I have no idea what this comic is about. I'm gonna need some help.
My name is Landry Q. Walker. I am one of the writers of Tron, Ghost in the Machine. The basic concept is following on Tron 2.0. A character is hit with a laser. They're not shrunken down into a tiny person running around having little tiny adventures on a circuit board. Everything we see in the film Tron, from my perception, is meant to be, kind of an analogous reality. Flynn is, in the film, he's turned into a being of pure information and incorporated into this system. Well, everything he's seeing is a matter of his limited human perceptions making sense of it as best he can. Add into that the idea that what do computers do a lot of at the time? If you boot up a computer and a program or a file is missing that it's looking for, it will reboot from a previously saved position. So the idea is Jet, having his 2.0 adventures, leaves the system at the end of the game. Well, then a computer is rebooted, it's looking for Jet, the jet.exe. It's trying to reboot. When it doesn't find him, it restores a backup it had made, an automatic backup. But the backup is so large, he's broken, it needs to be compiled. It's in 3 separate sort of components. And really the entire comic is just a story of this computer program being compiled, but it's 3 sections of a computer program, each with their own independent sense of will, trying to be forced into one being, and that's not something they necessarily want to do, if that makes sense.
Wow. Thank you, comic writer and author of Tron, the Ghost in the Machine, Landry Walker. That still makes no sense, but I think I like it. I interviewed Landry as well, so the full interview will be up on the channel as well as the one with TronFAQ. As you might be able to tell from what you just heard, this comic is quite bizarre. As confusing and ambitious as it is polarizing, the comic's focus on more psychological and borderline psychedelic concepts understandably drove a lot of fans away. I have to say, I'm not sure how much I like it as a Tron story, but I do really appreciate it as an experiment. It takes some seriously bold and unexpected directions, and I really couldn't put it down until I was finished. It's very obviously and directly inspired by Alice in the Wonderland, but in a way that distances itself from Tron's identity as a franchise, which is what made me like it a bit less, but it's also what made it so fascinating. Even outside of the comic's biggest swings, including its misses, the biggest problem for me was the pacing. It really affects how the story flows from panel to panel and ends up causing a lot of confusion, which put me off on a first reading. Some issues end without any big cliffhanger impact, making you wonder why it chose to end like that, and the whole of that last issue felt quite rushed.
Yes, I think the pacing is very off for the story from issue to issue. It was because we were in some ways reinventing on the fly, and it definitely affects the flow. Pacing is actually, I think, it's such a huge part of storytelling. When your pacing is off, and the pacing is off in this book, it can cast you out of the story to a degree. It can leave you less immersed, and anything that breaks your immersion with a story is bad for story, unless you're purposely pushing somebody out of the story to pull them back in. But when it's done unintentionally or unnaturally, without bits like this, you end up with a more jarring experience, and that was unfortunate.
I think it would be so interesting to see what this could have been had Disney not imposed so many restrictions onto it. But again, what we have is such a weird and bafflingly addictive departure from what Tron is that I can't help but recommend it despite its flaws. But I also can't help but warn you because of them. I also want to talk about the art, but I don't actually read enough comics to be fully confident in what I have to say. I don't know, I just wish there was someone I knew. An expert in comic book art maybe? I don't know. Oh. Hey Ollie. What's up? Louis de Martinez, the artist behind the first 2 issues, is clearly a big Matrix fan. I mean, the color direction for the real world is basically the exact same as the real world in the Matrix. The airbrush colors put you in a trance, feels like it could be someone's memory of the events. When the real world needs to be paranoia-inducing or claustrophobic, the panels start to get smaller and more uniform. The borders get thinner and the depth of field more shallow. Not that I'd know anything about depth of field, being two-dimensional and all. When the grid needs to be daunting or abstract, the panels start slanting down the page, descending into spreads of massive landscapes directed with these really cool digitally embellished tabs. I love the sense of scale in these issues, but if you're hoping that any of what I just said will give you a clue as to what's real and what isn't, you're shit out of luck. Because as Jet's mind becomes more fragile and his memories risk being overwritten, the rules of scale that De Martinez has established are also overwritten. The grid is then framed like the real world and vice versa, which distorts the vibe of each. De Martinez's character design is extremely strong throughout, and all characters, regardless of nearly identical outfits or color schemes, are all identifiable by silhouette alone, and his faces range from stoic to slightly unsettling page to page and sometimes panel to panel. Michael Scheuchert comes out of the gate swinging with issue 3. If the Matrix references were perhaps too subtle for you, issue 3's cover is simply a motherboard with cartridge credits and a white rabbit. The paneling becomes a lot more streamlined with strips of blue binary stretching across some of the frames. Scheuchert also takes the idea of the shallow backgrounds even further, placing Jet in an empty white space, reminiscent of Morpheus showing Neo the capabilities of his simulations. The backgrounds then suddenly jump from a Nintendo Wii home screen to a Lewis Carroll book, and that's definitely the means for some of the tonal whiplash to come. Scheuchert's cartoony line work on Clarence the Rabbit and his environments make him and Jet look like they're from completely different planes of existence, and as Clarence gets further into Jet's head, the borders go from black to white, and Jet falls through them and out the bottom of the page. Scheuchert's expressions, even when awkwardly proportioned, are consistently expressive and help give more impact to some darker moments. His locations get more ambitious and psychedelic throughout, the ramifications of which are unseen in Tron before, making it one of the most visually interesting takes on the story. Shortly after the release of Iron Man, Disney acquired Marvel for $4 billion in 2009. As one of their first collaborations, Marvel was tasked with creating a 2-issue comic book that would contextualize the events and world of Legacy while also preventing it from having a 3-hour runtime. The writers and artists at Marvel worked closely with Legacy's director and best director of this current generation, Joseph Kosinski, as well as the screenwriters Edward Kitsis and Adam Horowitz, to ensure both story and visual continuity. This comic had the pretty tough task of covering years of history in 100 or so pages, making sure to show enough to provide the proper context, while not showing too much that it would spoil or even retcon Legacy. Rather than fully focusing on lore dumps, however, the comic ends up being a pretty heartfelt character study of Kevin Flynn, as he balances the overwhelming stress of being the CEO of Encom following the events of Tron, his fear of having to become a father and building a stable legacy for his child, and having access to a divided world wherein he is a god who is too busy to attend to everyone's needs. I mean, if you think about it, it is basically a Razorhead. It was released a couple of months before Legacy in October 2010 to a lukewarm critical reception. It didn't make that big of a splash, but a lot of Tron fans appreciate it for being a more character-driven story, and not just taking the path of dumping years of lore for the sake of it. I don't have that much more to say for the intro, so let's just get into it. Starting with the first issue, the comic starts in 1983, the year after the film. Flynn has created the grid and copied over the Tron security program from the Encom system to protect it from grid bugs, which are, well, video game bugs, essentially. He then returns to the real world to attend his pregnant wife's sonogram, but he's too late. Her name is Jordan Canis, and I absolutely love her character, because it's something I've always wondered about. She's never really mentioned in Legacy, but the extent to which she tolerates Kevin's absence and passion for his work is just, well, it's fucking adorable, honestly. Kevin then meets up with Alan Bradley at the Encom building, who informs him that the big executives are unhappy with him as the CEO. To be able to better balance the growing bugginess of the grid, as well as the unhappy board members and his family life, Kevin creates Clue 2.0 to take care of the grid in his image with the help of another program named Shaddix. A little confusing fun fact, but later on in the comic and many years later, Shaddix works as a bartender in the End of Line Club, while in Legacy, Steven Lisberger, my love, cameos as a bartender in the End of Line Club named Shaddix with an I. Although something tells me they might not be the same character. Anyway, Kevin returns to the grid and visits the Sea of Simulation, where an isomorphic algorithm, or ISO, is created outside of Flynn's control. ISOs become a very important part of Tron from now. The name implies that they're a self-evolved polymorphic byproduct of the grid's evolution, meaning they look like programs, but they grow and learn just like users, and weren't created, they just kind of appeared. The ISO names herself Ophelia, which fascinates Kevin, but instills a borderline racist fear in Clue that the ISOs are causing the grid's bugginess and instability. I wonder if this is alluding to any form of social allegory. Kevin creates a phone so that his wife can contact him while he's in the grid, and then returns to the grid, where Clue expresses growing frustration regarding his prolonged absence and the inability of Clue to make important changes to the grid without Flynn's permission. Jordan then calls Flynn, and he promptly leaves the grid, which just kind of proves to Clue that the contact between worlds is actually possible, planting the seeds of his later plans in Legacy. In the real world, the issue ends with Flynn making it just in time to meet his newborn Sam. You remember how I said Jordan and Flynn's relationship is adorable? Well, the second issue starts off a couple years later with Kevin taking Sam to visit her. At her grave. Whew, I knew it was coming, but goddamn. When he returns to the grid, he finds it in shambles. There have been terrorist attacks all over the city, which Clue has blamed on the ISOs, so Flynn and Tron go to Argia to talk with Ophelia and her advisor Giles. Giles instantly gets angry and points out that programs are killing ISOs because of the terrorist attacks, making Flynn and Tron leave without any real progress made. Flynn then tells the Encom board that he's going to be stepping away from his role so he can focus on taking care of Sam, while Clue's totalitarian regime starts really cementing itself within the grid. Tron then goes to talk with Shaddix at the end of Line Club, where they discuss the possibly horrific direction Clue is heading towards. This leads to Flynn and Tron finding possible evidence that Clue ordered the attacks on the ISOs, which makes them go and confront him at the Sea of Simulation, just as a group of guardsmen poisons the water. Clue takes them out to make it look like they were working against his orders, but Flynn sees right through it and tries to convince Clue that the ISOs aren't a threat, which sadly falls on deaf ears. I won't talk about the short epilogue as it covers events told in Legacy, but I really like this comic. Again, I wouldn't have thought much of it had it just been a mid-story with the sole purpose of dumping lore, but it manages to really make you care about the real-world characters, as well as Finn's struggle to maintain order in his life, while also doing a really good job at expanding on Clue's motivations in Legacy. It's very much worth a read, and it has really pretty art. Now, I wish I could talk more about the art, but I really just don't know how to phrase— Oh wait!
I'm back, and I want to talk about more comic art. So, the prologue of Tron Betrayal is illustrated by Jeff Matsuda, whose art I instantly felt like I recognised, but I couldn't quite place where, until I found out that he was a concept artist for the 2004 Batman animated series, The Batman, which was always praised for its dynamic takes on the characters, specifically those grungy redesigns that Batman's rogues were given. Matsuda's cartoonish style fits surprisingly well into the world of the original Tron. His character designs look like they could pass as members of the Batman's cast, and the bikes look as though they were ripped straight from the 3D renders of the film. His art also serves to be in direct contrast to that of Andy Tongs, who opens the first chapter with a brilliant translation of the design philosophy behind Tron Legacy, establishing the time skip entirely through the art. His depiction of the grid looks like it could be concept art for the film. He also does such a great job at conveying motion in his frames. The composition of every single chase scene in the comic is bursting with kinetic energy, making the static scenes in the real world feel extremely deliberate. The way he draws the suits and the bikes are absolutely perfect, and the pages where something is either being de-rezzed or rezzed in. Anyway, seeing the code generate these objects is really fun and provides so much movement that's fundamental to the function of Tron as a world. And any single one of his full page spreads I'd print out and has as a poster on my wall. The way Tong draws the buildings on the grid reminds me so much of the environments from Tron Uprising, and definitely helps connect the two in my mind. So much of the architecture here is stunningly detailed. His fight scenes are also really strong. There's weight behind each swing of the disc. The diagonal slashing borders and pixel blood do a great job at adding stakes and a sense of reality to them. I basically have no complaints about Andy Tong's work either, and I think he does the absolute best job at translating Tron into comic book form.
Oh fuck, I gotta talk about evolution now. I've started all of these with more of a production background to set the stage, but I really don't like this game. Alright, okay, calm down. I get that that's sort of a controversial thing to say since a lot of Legacy fans love this game, but my god, it ain't good. That isn't to say that it's fully bad. I'll go deeper into it during the story and gameplay segments, but this game does have some stuff going for it. It just feels excruciating to play in. For a maximum 4-hour game, it has so much filler content that's clearly made to fatten up a game that should have just been an hour or two into a fully priced experience. Developed by Propaganda Games, this game was intended to bridge the narrative gap between Betrayal and Legacy. It's a third-person action game which wears its Prince of Persia inspirations on its sleeve. Using the help of the Legacy visual department, the developers created a world which matched the visual identity of Legacy, but this joint effort proved to be more detrimental than it was beneficial, as, not sure if you knew this already, but games take a lot longer to make than films. Evolution had to release alongside the film, so a lot of the back end of the game, as well as the multiplayer mode, was rushed just to shit it out on time. And my god, is this chicken gonna give you salmonella with how raw it is. With this and Betrayal, Disney was heavily pushing for Tron to become a multimedia franchise, so how did it do? Well, this is Tron, so surely you know how this is going to go by now. Critics thought it was unpolished and forgettable in spite of its decent visuals, criticizing the story for standing on its own much less than it ties into that of Legacy. General audiences didn't care much for it due to it being buggy and the least intriguing game of its genre, and Tron fans coped and told themselves it was good just because it gave some context to Legacy, although the same context is given better in Betrayal. And I played it at the time and thought it was just okay. Fuck it, everyone knows 2010 was a banger year for games, so let's just see what this thing was competing against, just for the fun of it. Super Mario Galaxy 2, Mass Effect 2, Heavy Rain, Fallout New Vegas, Metro 2033, Halo Reach, Battlefield Bad Company 2, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, God of War 3, Red Dead Redemption, Call of Duty Black Ops, and the most famous game of all time, ZHP Unlosing Ranger vs Dark Death Evil Man on the PSP. And somehow, Disney was shocked this game made a grand total of $12. Like I said, the story here is thin, so this really shouldn't take that long. The game's intro goes over everything shown in Betrayal, with the building of the new grid and the appearance of the ISOs. You play as a program named Anon, who is created by Flynn to monitor and investigate a spreading corruption in the grid, and this cool looking guy called Abraxas is the cause of that corruption. You fight a couple of his goons and have a short encounter with him as part of the tutorial just before he retreats, because he's a pussy. You then witness a coup where Clue betrays Flynn and kills Tron. I'll go into this later during the Legacy section as there's a lot more to talk about there, but my god, they just killed Tron! Some other useless stuff happens, and in Argia, the ISO city, you witness a meeting between Clue and Ophelia, now the leader of the ISOs, where he tries to blame the deaths of Flynn and Tron on Anon, while pretending to want to keep the peace. You go to talk to Ophelia in order to clear your name, and she tells you to try and find Flynn through a program called Gibson, who helped him escape the city after the coup. Gibson was arrested and forced to go through the disc arena, so you find him and break him out, and he takes you to a colony where he took Flynn. After finding out that the colony has been corrupted and Flynn isn't there, you escape just as Abraxas corrupts Gibson and forces you to derez him. You then head back to Argia just as Clue begins a genocide against the ISOs. Here you witness Clue admitting he infected Jalen, who is Ophelia's right-hand man, with the Abraxas virus just before he kills her. So you manage to escape Argia just before Clue destroys it and are rescued by Flynn himself. He tells you to save Cora as she is the last hope for the ISOs, so you reach Clue's ship, fight and derez Abraxas, and save her, getting crushed by a recognizer in the process, which leads perfectly into the events of Legacy. Even though Anon is a silent protagonist, I almost felt actual emotions as he's derezed. Almost. Aside from the gameplay aspects and the pacing, the biggest issue I have with the story itself is that you don't actually play that big of a role in the events. Aside from taking Cora to Flynn, you just kind of witness all of it. Every big event that leads to Legacy is just something you stumble upon. It feels like it was scrambled together because aside from the Purge and Clue's coup, nothing that happens in this game is even mentioned in the film. Anon, Gibson, Ophelia, Jalen, or even Abraxas, no one is relevant at all. I do want to start this section off by saying that I'm really not used to playing games on controller. I play everything with mouse and keyboard, but this game is actually quite hard to find, and I already had it on my Xbox, so I just thugged it out. That being said, this game is janky as fuck. It felt like the complete opposite of playing Tron 2.0, where I loved everything except the light cycle arena. In Evolution, the light cycle sections are the only parts I had a good time playing, and even those have their issues with the motion blur making it so difficult to see where you're driving. The disc combat is passable, with it never really surpassing any contemporaries and progressing so little throughout the game that I'd struggle to even call it progression. The other core mechanic in this game is the parkour, which this game is primarily built around, and it saddens me to say that it's just not great. Look, believe it or not, I went into this game trying to have a positive outlook, and the parkour does have a specific charm to it, but it's way too stiff to really stand out. The camera is so garbage that it makes it genuinely difficult to do anything where you have to turn more than 30 degrees while running without stopping, which really just breaks the flow. The boss fights are so mid and forgettable that I wouldn't even be able to tell you anything about them other than they have a shitty gimmick to break up the pace of just hitting an enemy 1,000 times. Despite all of that, the game could have still been good had the story gripped me, but my god, this is some cheap filler. Overall, there's a good 30 minutes worth of story crammed into this 4 to 5 hour game. The first half of the game is pretty much all gameplay with barely any story to connect the levels together, while the second half has a bit more story going on, but it's so obvious that due to both being rushed and the fact that they have to stretch the runtime out to be worth the entry fee, that the game is so heavily padded out with boring gameplay sections. This reaching its boiling point in chapter 5, where you have to escape the city of Argia. Completing the level means doing repetitive parkour sections and then entering a room to fight enemies 5 times in a row. It's crazy, the rooms literally all look the same. I actually thought I'd accidentally glitched the game out just because of how cheap it felt. And it's not like you fight a couple of enemies and are done. No, you fight multiple waves of enemies over and over again just until the mission ends. Honestly, I really wanted to like this game. I had fond memories of it from my childhood, so I desperately wanted this to be some underrated gem that the critics just simply didn't understand, but it's just not. I'm sure some fans will still get a kick out of it and the shoestring story connecting the level and game design, which was outdated even for 2010, but I couldn't help but see it as an advert for legacy. Every single entry in Tron as a franchise has had so much love and effort put into it that was sadly just not appreciated by audiences and critics alike, but this was such a disappointing and half-assed experience that it sticks out like a sore thumb. Again, it just didn't hold up for me at all. Anyway, I don't really like being negative in a Tron video, so what's next? Finally. Tron Legacy. How do you even begin to talk about the best film ever made? It's like discussing Aristotle's Poetics and being expected to say something new. Before I begin talking about this masterpiece, I do want to say that I am obviously biased. I will try to talk about this film with the same nuance I've tried to approach everything else with, but that's hard considering I've seen this film a million times. It is my comfort movie and my favourite film, but with that out the way, Disney had been wanting to make a Tron sequel since the 90s. It went through a series of creatives, including the writer of Disney classics like the Toy Story films, A Bug's Life and Cars, John Lasseter. Writers were brought in to write a treatment which would be handed to a TV producer in the hopes of making it a TV movie, although that would change due to the sheer scope of the project. That treatment eventually turned into the game Tron 2.0, which, as stated before, really paved the way for Legacy. I couldn't find why the focus shifted from Kevin and his son to Alan and Jet, but if I had to guess, it'd probably just be because they couldn't manage to get Jeff Bridges. Either way, Disney just wouldn't be convinced without some form of proof of concept. Enter the GOAT. Throughout the 2000s, architect and visual designer Joseph Kosinski had been making a name for himself, directing some of the most recognizable commercials, including the Halo 3 Starry Nights trailer, Rendezvous, and even the fantastic Mad World trailers for Gears of War 2 and the Taco Bell World of Fries ad, which I still genuinely think is one of the best fast food adverts ever made. Most important to this story, however, was a collection he directed for Nike in collaboration with the musician TRS-80. These adverts showed that Kosinski had two main skills that would end up attracting Disney's attention. Firstly, due to his background in architecture, he had a clear eye for sleek and futuristic landscapes, which felt real enough to not look bad, while synthesized enough to look stylized. Secondly, he knew how to blend actors into a CGI world to make them not look like they're standing out. After Disney reached out to him, he pitched his idea for a Tron sequel. It was darker and more realistic than what had come before, focusing less on being a simple adventure film and more on making it an immersive world where the characters and philosophies sit it center stage. He brought in the production designer who helped give a lot of his adverts their distinct visual style, Darren Guilford, to draw up some concept art and ideas for what an upgraded grid could look like. Guilford wanted the grid to look different, while still keeping the same design principles from the original, making it look more like an evolution than just an upgrade, while also implementing inspirations from modern fashion and vehicle design languages. Disney actually liked the idea, but was worried that the film wouldn't be able to garner enough attention, with Tron being a relatively niche 80s film when compared to the notorious classics that were released within the same year, such as Blade Runner and The Thing. Because of this, the mad legend Kaczynski convinced Disney to fund a 2-minute test reel, which would be shown at the 2008 San Diego Comic-Con. The audience went crazy. The reel was oozing with style, and those who were fans of the original were ecstatic to see Jeff Bridges' return. But was this enough to get such a beefy project greenlit? Yes. Yes, it was. The script went through many different writers and ideas, but Disney finally landed on Adam Horowitz and Edward Kitsis, who wrote a lot of episodes for Lost. They understood that since the film would be a visual feast for the eyes, they needed to tie that together with great characters and an emotional core that was lacking from the original. So they thought of a story where Kevin Flynn has gone missing and his son must enter the grid to search for him. Before previs even began, Kaczynski approached Daft Punk to do the soundtrack, although sadly they couldn't due to being on tour. And honestly, what a shame. Can you imagine what a Daft Punk Tron soundtrack would sound like? It very well could be the best soundtrack ever made. Anyway, due to how important the visuals were to the film, prevising was an extensive process where everything was designed quite early so as to be able to seamlessly blend built sets and physical production design with the CG. Holy shit, Daft Punk confirmed they're working on the score. This is massive. This was pivotal to the pre-production of the film, as most likely due to his collaborations with TRS-80, Kaczynski understood how integral it is to partner great visuals with great sound. He got the French Goofy Helmet fellas to compose and produce songs relatively early so that the music could be listened to throughout the filming process to help synergize the actors and crew with the vision of the final product. Things from here started to really speed up, with Garrett Hedlund being cast as Kevin Flynn's son Sam, due to Kaczynski wanting to spotlight a relative newcomer as the protagonist, and Olivia Wilde being cast as Cora due to her ability to portray both childlike innocence and a fierce strength and bravery in combat. Obviously, Jeff Bridges was set to return as both Kevin Flynn and a more advanced version of Clue. Bruce Boxleitner also returned in a smaller role as Alan Bradley, and Michael Sheen was cast as an absolute joy of a character, Zeus, who is like the grid's crackhead David Bowie. Who else? Oh yeah, Cillian Murphy is in it too. Everything was looking great, with post-production lasting nearly 2 years just to make sure the film looked as good as it could and that it fully utilized all of its technology to its fullest extent. Set to release in December 2010, the film was ready. So what was this utter masterpiece about? The film begins roughly 20 years after the events of the original Tron. Kevin Flynn went missing in the late 80s, and his son Sam grew up mainly under the care of his grandparents and Alan Bradley. Now being an adult, he's the majority shareholder in Encom stock and pretty much just uses that to prank them, which actually ends up getting him arrested. After he's released, he returns to his home to find Alan waiting to tell him he received a page from Kevin's arcade. Sam goes to check it out and is instantly transported into the grid, where he's picked up by a recognizer and made to partake in the disc arena. After kinda getting the hang of it, he starts completely cheesing his opponents and just skips to the final boss, Rinsler, who completely wipes the floor with his face. However, Sam starts bleeding, which shows this absolute demon that he's a user. He's brought to the leader, who reveals himself to be none other than Kevin Flynn himself. I'll admit, I always thought he was acting weird here. I don't know if it's just a de-aging effect getting in the way of the performance or what, but oh shit, the plot thickens. Somehow going from the funny screaming guy at the start of Tron to the megalomaniac leader of the grid. Clue challenges Sam to the light cycle arena, and well, this is one of the best scenes in cinematic history. Honestly, if Sergei Eisenstein took a couple of notes from this scene alone, that Odessa Steps scene in Battleship Potemkin could slap so hard. Clue rinses Sam and his teammates, with the only reason for Sam not being obliterated being that a program drives onto the grid and helps him escape by driving into the Outlands, where Clue's forces can't follow them. The program reveals herself to be Cora and takes him to... Wait, is that... Or is it... Okay, no, that's actually Kevin Flynn. Okay. The father and son catch up with Kevin explaining the coup I mentioned in the evolution section, and how not only is that why he's been unable to leave for the past 2 decades, but also that Clue reprogrammed Tron into Rinsler. Sam sees their reunion as an opportunity to leave and live the life he always wanted with his dad, but Kevin explains that if they do, Clue will use that as an opportunity to follow them out into the real world. Sam doesn't really accept this, seeing this as a weakness in his dad, so he steals his light cycle and drives into the city, where he goes to the End of Line Club to meet Zeus, a program who can help him escape so he can shut Clue down from the outside. Zeus is kind of a piece of shit, however, as he sold Sam out to Clue, leading to an absolute massacre. Kevin and Cora show up to save the day and escape with Sam on a solar sailor, which is actually going directly into Clue's ship as it's carrying ordinary programs to be repurposed into Clue's army. Here they're able to hijack a jet and fly it to the portal, while Clue, Rinsler and his Blackguard goons chase them. Rinsler has one of my favourite moments in the film where the remaining Tron in him wakes up and flies his jet into Clue's, allowing them to gain some distance as he falls into the sea of simulation and turns blue. Can't wait for that to be explored in Ares. Now at the bridge to the portal, Clue is caught up to them and tries to jump in with them, just as Kevin uses his developer god powers or something to pull him towards him and reintegrate Clue into himself, defeating Clue and sacrificing himself in time to let Sam and Cora escape. Once back to the real world, Sam takes Cora on a bike ride, letting her experience her first sunrise. The film then ends with one of the hardest end credits songs, and segue. It's kind of impossible to talk about this film without at least mentioning the soundtrack by Daft Punk. Not only is it a perfect soundtrack for the film, but it's also just one of the best soundtracks ever made in my opinion. Joseph Trapanese often gets left out of the conversation, but he arranged the music and was the orchestrator for, well, the orchestra. And the way this album blends the orchestral elements with the electronic elements is honestly so incredible and seamless. It's a perfect soundtrack, but also just a perfect album that is tied with the visuals so intricately that if you watch the film once and listen to the soundtrack after, you'll be able to perfectly picture the scenes. I've listened to this album so many hundreds of times, and not only was it my entry into Daft Punk, it also inspired my own music, as well as my tastes. I would really recommend watching the video Why the Tron Legacy Score is one of Daft Punk's best albums by The Premise. It does a great job at describing the potency of this soundtrack through music theory. I honestly thought I would have more to say here, but it's one of those things that is so good that I just don't have much more to say here, other than just listen to it. In true Tron fashion, the film had mixed reception on release. Audiences responded to it well enough, enjoying the immersion into a fully digital world and the incredible soundtrack. Critics also had a lot of positives to say, with most praising the visuals and soundtrack too, although they also found the story to be confusing and thin, while the characters were underbaked and uninteresting. Despite that, the film managed to win 10 of the 52 awards it was nominated for, with one even being an Oscar, which is quite rare for this type of film. Although, mind you, one of those wins was for the sequels that shouldn't exist award, so take that how you will. I think because of the third film being cancelled at the time, the rhetoric has come about that this film flopped at the box office, but it grossed over $400 million on a $170 million budget. Now, that isn't really busting any blocks, especially when you consider that with marketing costs and merchandise. The budget is probably closer to $250 million, but it did definitely make a profit. There's also this idea that Disney wasn't confident in this movie, so somehow they shot it in the foot. Brother, adjusting for inflation, $170 million today is around $250 million. That's the same budget as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. Legacy is still to this day one of the most expensive directorial debuts. Have you seen the marketing campaign this film had? The comic and the game that came out with this film? The show that came after it? Disney had high hopes for Legacy just as they did for the original. And speaking of the original film, although this film wasn't the first Legacy sequel, it did heavily influence what would later turn out to be an admittedly tired and eye-rollingly overdone trend. It laid a lot of the groundwork for films like Creed, The Force Awakens, and Scream 5. I mean, it was ahead of its time. Not just with that as well, but also in how it used CGI. It did come out the year after Avatar, so it wasn't exactly the first film to sell audiences on a fully 3D rendered world, but it did help solidify the possibility of immersion. And people laugh at the Jeff Bridges de-aging effects, and to be honest, they did at the time as well, but I would argue that it doesn't actually look too bad, especially when you consider this was 6 years before this. I think what really helps the film's visuals and effects to still stand the test of time to this day is mainly the fact that they're used with purpose and intent. This is something that's becoming less and less common nowadays, but not only are the visuals achieved with a mixture of practical sets and costumes as well as CGI wizardry, but the film is shot to really ensure the effects are in a setting where they can fully flourish. The whole film takes place at night, which not only helps create a consistent mood and tone, but also helps cover up any mistakes or wonkiness. It's also just shot really well, with the director of photography Claudio Miranda putting a lot of effort into making the film look stylized through the shot compositions. I know critics and even audiences didn't connect too much to the characters in the film, but I just love how the father-son stuff was handled, because in that first shot between the two, the actors convey so much of the heartbreak as well as the awkwardness of an adult who has changed so much since he was a child, catching up with an older version of his father who has also changed, while also still staying the same. I just love the dinner scene with them, where Kevin asks Sam if he's been to college or if he has a girlfriend and children, only to seem slightly disappointed when Sam says no. It leads so perfectly into his final interaction with Clue, where he tells him that there's no point chasing perfection, because even in that small scene you see how Kevin is so held back by this idea of perfection that he lets it create tension during this opportunity to connect with his son and hear about the life he's had to live without him. It also does a good job at tying back to this theme of Clue, Cora and Sam all being Kevin's children, and each one taking a different aspect of his personality. I also do think I would be disrespecting my inner child if I didn't at least briefly talk about Rinsler. I get all the comparisons to Darth Maul, but I never cared about Star Wars growing up, so this guy was such a cool character to me growing up. I remember first watching this film when I was 7 years old and finding out that he was Tron. I think I probably shit my pants, to be honest. Every time this dude's on screen, I still get that childish giddiness as he does a triple backflip over a disc for no other reason than just being sick. It's pretty hard to describe everything I like about this film, because I joke about this film being the best film of all time and being a masterpiece and everything, but I honestly don't have any critiques for this film. The most I could say is that in the middle chunk of the film, after Sam finds Kevin, the pacing slows down quite a bit, but I also think that was so necessary to give the film some breathing room to develop these characters and their relationships. It just helps differentiate it from your typical blockbuster where there isn't that much time given to characters. I personally don't see this as a flaw at all, but when I've showed this film to friends, this is usually where their attention starts to wander. Obviously, this means I need new friends. Look, I understand that not only is this film not perfect in most people's eyes, but much like the original, it's just not for everyone. But I do love everything about it. I get a rush every time I see Sam first get picked up by a recognizer. Every time I hear the armory needle drop as the sirens step out to dress Sam. Every time the world slows down and quietens as Sam begins his first light cycle race. Every single fucking time Kevin turns to see his son, 20 years older, but instantly knowing without a shadow of a doubt that it's him. Yes, the film's visuals and soundtrack are its strongest attributes, but I hate how that's supposed to be a negative. The needle drops alone generate so much of an emotional reaction that the people who write it off by saying style over substance completely miss the point that in film, style can be the substance. Maybe because of my attachment to the characters, I get more of an emotional response to the interactions between Sam and Kevin, or the brief line Kevin mumbles at Rinsler, the only remnant of what his dream used to represent. But I will never find this film hollow. It is a warm blanket that has kept me company whenever I needed it the most and least alike, for the majority of my life, and for that, it's my favourite film. Although Legacy made pretty much all of its budget back, it didn't actually generate that much profit despite its moderate success. This meant that while too hesitant to initially greenlight a sequel, Disney wasn't ready to fully move on from the grid just yet. Supposedly, Disney's animation team was already thinking about how to expand the world of the grid on a lower budget even before Legacy's release, wanting to further explore Clue's turn from protector of the grid to its tyrannical oppressor. Disney got the writers behind Legacy, Kittis and Horowitz, to hop on the project as creators and executive producers, with the inspiration for the art style coming partly from Genndy Tartakovsky's projects such as Samurai Jack. Because of that, they hired the storyboard artist for a handful of Tartakovsky projects including Samurai Jack, Powerpuff Girls and Dexter's Laboratory, Charlie Bean, to spearhead the show's creation as director. In a stroke of pure genius, Alberto Mielgo was hired as art director. Alberto, mind you, wrote, directed and designed The Witness and Jabaro, which are two of the most unique and stylistically interesting episodes episodes of Love, Death and Robots. He also worked as the production designer and art director on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse before leaving due to creative differences, despite his influence being visibly monumental to the film's identity. I'd highly recommend checking out his website to see some more of his concept art and personal work, since he has such a clear and unique style that has really inspired a lot of the animation we're seeing today. Disney managed to get some serious star power on the voice cast, with Bruce Boxleitner returning to voice Tron, Elijah fucking Wood voices the main character Beck, Lance Henriksen as the villain Tesla, and Emmanuel Chiriqui and Paul Rubens as his right-hand men. Yes, Pee Wee Herman, Trisha Helfer, Mandy Moore, Nate Caudry, David Arquette, the late great Lance Reddick, John Glover, Donald Faison, Fred Tatasciore, Matt Jones. My god, what a cast. Oh wait, Aaron Paul, Kate Mara, Chris Klein, Paul Scheer, Marcia Gay Harden, Catherine Hunter, Adam Devine, Ben Schwartz, Mark Boone Jr., oh yeah, and Olivia Wilde. With such a stacked cast, it's obvious Disney was at least somewhat confident about Uprising. And it seems they were right, as the show began airing in 2012 on Disney XD and was met with unanimous acclaim, with it still being the second highest rated Disney XD show, just under Gravity Falls. It was nominated for and even won multiple awards, mainly for its animation, with Mielgo receiving both an Emmy and an Ammy for Best Art Direction. Since its release, the show has followed suit with all Tron media in garnering the cult classic status, with many fans still singing its praises as one of the best animated shows ever made. So, how does it hold up? Is it as good as everyone says? And why is it not talked about as much nowadays? Well, to get into that, we need to talk about the story, but before I do, just watch this show. It is absolutely everything people say it is and more. Seriously, do yourself a favor and go into this blind. It's incredible. The show starts with Beck, a program who calls himself the Renegade and uses the symbol of Tron to fight back against Clu's oppressive regime. After escaping some bad guys, he crash lands in the Outlands, where he is captured and interrogated by Rinsler. Here we learn a bit about his home, Argon City, and his life working with his friends, namely his best friend Bodhi. Just in time to ruin their hangout, one of Clu's higher-ups, General Tesla, brings his forces to Argon City and declares it occupied territory. As Beck and Bodhi are training for disc battles, Tesla's forces drop a giant statue of Clu in the middle of the court. This makes Bodhi mad and try to argue with some of the guards, who instantly derez him. Holy. Not only was this not expected, but it also does a perfect job at setting the stakes for what is to come. The show in general does a great job at handling more mature themes while balancing them out and making them more digestible for a younger audience. This is the inciting incident that really pushed Beck to take the mantle of Renegade. Back in the interrogation room, Rinsler reveals himself to be Tron, telling Beck he wants to train him to take up the Tron name and start a revolution against Clu's oppression. I obviously can't cover the show's whole story in this section, but throughout you watch Beck sabotage plans, hijack broadcasts and rescue prisoners countless times as he builds a name for himself among the grid. One thing I really loved in the show was how the side characters are handled, like how Beck's friend and co-worker Zed has a crush on another one of Beck's friends, Mara, but politically opposes her throughout most of the show, or how Paige desperately wants to capture the Renegade to impress Tesla, but she keeps getting caught in situations where she has no option but to listen to him and eventually go on a date with him. As I started to like the characters more, I was worried the show's semi-serialized structure would inhibit the progression these characters deserve, but the way in which the show does it, as well as how it drags it out throughout the whole season, went so far beyond any expectations I had. I actually adore Gravity Falls, but that show can sometimes feel frustrating to binge since there are a number of bottle episodes with little to no character development, whereas in Uprising, it's a constant dance of characters fighting their programming. Like I said, if you haven't seen this show or don't remember anything about it like I did, I really recommend going in blind. It was such a fun viewing experience, and overall it clocks in at around 7 hours in runtime. With that being said, some of the bigger plot points revolve around the reveal and slight retconning of how Tron actually survived the coup shown in Legacy and Evolution, and how he came out of it so scarred that that's why he needs a protege. On top of this, there's Cyrus, who's voiced by Jesse Pinkman himself, who actually ends up kind of being the big bad by the end. He was Tron's first attempt at the Renegade, but he turned out to be a complete psychopath who believed that the only way to save the grid was to reset it. After Beck accidentally unleashes him from a prison Tron built specifically to house him, he comes to wreak havoc and literally does the thing that happens in The Dark Knight, except I'm not sure if this is going to be controversial, but I preferred it here since I cared so much more about Tron, Mara, Zed and Abel than I did for Harvey Dent and Rachel. The first season ends on a great cliffhanger, with the citizens of the grid rallying up to protect the Renegade against Tesla's army, and Clue himself coming to Argon City to take care of the problem. This leads perfectly into the Wait. No, please. Okay, let's just rip the band-aid off. This show was cancelled after just one season. So many character arcs, a great cliffhanger, all of it abandoned right as it peaks. Despite all of the acclaim, without much notice at all, Disney moved Uprising's time slot to late evenings during weekdays, basically sending the lamb to the slaughter to ensure low ratings and eventually cancelling the show because of it. But why? Why would Disney do this? Here's the thing. We do have to speculate, but it is quite obvious why. Disney always saw Tron as their indirect competitor to Star Wars, with Legacy even having lightsabers in it. Tron has also always been really expensive, but too niche to generate enough mainstream success and profit. Now, this show aired from late 2012 to early 2013. You know what else Disney did in late 2012? Star Wars was exactly what Disney always wanted Tron to be. It's extremely expensive, but it generates so much profit that if you put yourself in the shoes of a businessman who cares more about money than art, it's a no-brainer to ditch Tron for it. This is honestly such a shame, because Tron Uprising is by far the best Tron media out there. I still personally prefer Legacy because I've seen it so many times, but the intricacies in the story and the character interactions in this one season alone are so much better than anything Disney has done with Star Wars outside of Andor. The writing in this show can be quite cliche at times, but overall it does a great job of making a story that could either be too adult oriented to land with younger audiences or too diluted and child friendly to resonate with older audiences. It's something which has the fun and charm of something like Gravity Falls while still having a mature handling of themes and stakes of something like the Battle of Algiers. I doubt we ever will, but I really hope one day we can see a continuation of this show, because I was so much more invested in the characters than I thought I would be. I love the relationship between Beck and Paige. They have such good chemistry and I couldn't wait to see her discover Beck's true identity. I was worried about how they would handle Tron not becoming Rinsler straight away, but it's done in such a great way, with Bruce Boxleitner also giving such a great performance, that by the end, I couldn't wait to see him be fully turned into Rinsler, just because I trust the writers enough to know that it would be some of the most engaging and heartbreaking television ever. Okay, maybe I'm being a bit dramatic, but for example, even though he only appears in 2 episodes at the start of the season, I really liked the late great Lance Reddick's character, Cutler. He has a great character who bounces off of Beck perfectly, and I couldn't wait to see him again. But when he shows back up, there's a reveal that just broke my heart. That's mainly because I had to wait a whole season for it. Just the way the show is structured and written is so good at making setups and payoffs feel as satisfying as possible. I also can't really talk about this show without mentioning the visual style. Mielgo's art direction truly deserves the recognition it received, because this show is so good looking and well animated, it's insane. It clearly displays his style while still perfectly blending itself into Tron's established visual identity. I think a lot of why the visuals for this show do such a great job at propelling the great writing is also the music. Joseph Trapanese returned as composer, taking a lot of sounds and themes from the Legacy soundtrack and using them to create new motifs that perfectly work hand in hand with the visuals to create an atmosphere that is still unmatched in the sphere of animated television. So clearly I love this show. It's underappreciated and it hurts that it might never be continued, although I thought the same thing for Tron Legacy, and well, here we are, so maybe all hope isn't lost. Either way, what did Disney's acquisition of Star Wars mean for Tron? Would they at least try to keep dipping their toes in every now and then? Surely we don't have to wait like too long to find the answer to that question, right? Right? 13 years. That's how long it's been since Legacy. 11 since Uprising, and 8 since Ascension was cancelled. Honestly, it's not looking good. Ascension has been reworked into Tron Ares and has reportedly been in development since 2017, but it seems to be in development hell. Many are losing hope for any continuation of Tron. That is, until... Around 2022, Disney approached the indie game studios of BitHell Games. BitHell? Or is it Bithell? I'm just going to say Bithell, who are responsible for games such as Volume, Subsurface Circular and Quarantine Circular, and The Solitaire Conspiracy. Most of their games are visual novels, so when Disney asked Bithell what they would do with an IP like Tron, the answer seemed obvious. A choice-based visual novel, where the centerpiece is the characters that you encounter and the relationships you build with them. Mike Bithell, the studio's founder, was fascinated by the mythology and lore of Tron, and he wanted to build upon it in a way that showed the grid in a way it had never been shown before. With pretty loose creative oversight from Disney, mainly just ensuring there was mythological continuity with the other entries in the franchise, Bithell was able to create a unique story with completely new characters. I won't lie, this is the first visual novel I've ever played, so it did take a little bit of getting used to. There isn't much gameplay outside of a recurring puzzle, the rest is all story and dialogue, which did make for a unique experience throughout its 2-hour runtime. Also, when talking about the story, I'm going to try and keep it somewhat vague, since I only know the story beats that I played, but I will talk about the choices I made and the overall story I experienced. With that being said, this game is set on a new grid created as a backup system specifically to House ISOs. It's called the Arc Grid, and due to the events shown in Evolution and Legacy, it was left abandoned by Flynn and forced to evolve on its own. This caused societies to grow independently, with factions forming, most notably Core, who are a more conservative governing body centered around maintaining order and controlling information, and the Automata, which are a group that believes the existence of users to be a myth. You play as Query, who is an investigator part of a faction called the Disciples of Tron. It's essentially a group of detectives who investigates current events without interfering, while also upholding the values of Tron. You're called on to investigate an explosion and break-in at the repository, which is a massive library that houses priceless code and data. As you enter, you are greeted by a program called Grish, who is a war veteran and security program at the repository. He takes you to Prince, the boss of the building, who's obsessed enough with users that his office is filled with trinkets from the real world, ranging from action figures to the jacket that Flynn wears in the original film. There's a fun detail in Prince's office where later on you can read an instruction manual for a computer, which causes Query to spiral into an existential rabbit hole when he reads about how the computer connects to other devices within the user's home, seemingly proving the multiple grid theory, a fact so terrifying that Query has to stop reading. I thought this was great on so many levels, because if you found a book that showed undeniable evidence that multiple universes exist, your whole world would collapse around you. And also it does a great job at showing how far the powers of the Core's manipulation of information really extend, with this literally just being some trinket displayed in Prince's office. You then talk to Cass, who is a security guard for the vault, who was injured in the explosion and feels desperate to help you in your investigation. Anyway, the explosion is mysteriously causing people's memories to basically fragment, which leads you to the only gameplay in this game, the Disk Defrag minigame. It allows you to undo the memory fragmentation so you can continue on your investigation using the character's memories. At some point you meet a rogue program named Proxy, who served in the war with Grish and now wants to use the break-in to steal a piece of code from the repository that could end the Core's authoritarian rule over information. According to Proxy, this code can supposedly give a program superpowers. It's left ambiguous, but I do wonder if this refers to the permanence code, which Tron Ares seems to be centering itself around. After some investigating, it seems that whoever caused the break-in actually wanted to release the code, with it never being revealed who did it, despite it being implied that it was someone from the inside. After Prince realizes he's never actually seen Cass around the repository before, he suspects them for being behind everything. So when you question them, you discover that they actually were the contents of the vault. Cass has an ability to foresee future events, and due to them seeing the future destruction of the Arc Grid, they were locked in a cell their whole life. Whoever locked them up transported them to a vault in the repository, and since Cass is a high energy maintenance program, they are fitted with a now unstable cell, which is causing the subsequent explosions and memory loss. This is now where the endings branch off, so I'll only talk about the ending I got in case you want to play this for yourself and get a different ending. I'm not gonna lie, I completely shithoused all the choices. I accidentally killed Prince while trying to apprehend Proxy, which subsequently made Grish consider me a mortal enemy. Then I killed him and escaped with Cass, completely going against all of the rules of the Disciples of Tron, mainly never to interfere or take sides with any involved party. It did make for a pretty cool ending though, as under Query's protection, Cass's vision can hopefully be revealed to the public to start some sort of revolution, and we all know how much Tron is centered around anti-authoritarian and anti-fascist government revolt. Honestly, I'm kind of mixed on this game. Firstly, I have to say that this didn't really convince me on the medium of visual novels. I would have preferred a full-fledged game or even comic or novel, although that would have taken out the possibility of choice. I feel like for this genre to really work, the writing would need to be top-notch, and although it is mostly good, it also has a lot of weaknesses. My biggest problem was the lack of nuance in reactions to the choices you make. When someone disagrees with your choice or actions, there isn't some intelligent conversation about it. No, they literally tell you, "You are now my enemy." For example, there is an automata character named Sierra, who's been locked up since Grish suspects that he was the one who blew up the vault. In my first meeting with him, I was able to garner a lot of respect and rapport. Later on, once you find out about Cass, he's proved to have an alibi, corroborated by Ada, who is the repository's librarian. So you are given the option to let him go or keep him locked up. There are a couple problems here though. Firstly, Ada admits that she leaked data to outside parties as a way of countering cause suppression of information. So this could have led to the break-in, and although she does express remorse, I still don't fully trust her as the one person who can prove Sierra's innocence. Aside from that, the other problem is that he seems to be in such a rush to leave, and this choice was given to me around halfway through the game when I just did not have enough evidence to write off any suspects. This meant I chose to keep him locked up until I had enough evidence to be able to confidently say that he had nothing to do with it. Also, mind you, this guy joked about setting off the bomb remotely. How is that not a little suspicious? To me, this choice made perfect sense because if I'm at the scene of a crime and the only person who can corroborate my alibi is also the person who might have accidentally caused the crime, I'm probably going to be asked to stick around for further questioning. Despite that, Sierra burst in anger, shouting, "You are my enemy, you are no friend of mine," and Ada even heavily judges me for my choice. Do you see what I mean? This will always be a problem with games where you choose dialogue to impact events, but I just wish I could have explained my decision to Sierra and kept the respect with him, instead of him just declaring me a mortal enemy and Query accepting that and walking away. Aside from that, I had some issues with the narrative as well. This might just be me, but I usually tend to not like stuff where the whole purpose is to just build upon lore. This was Bithel's whole intention with the game, so it's less something they did wrong and more a decision I didn't like. A lot of the narrative revolves around world building exposition for a grid I'm told to care about, rather than one I naturally grow attached to. There are constant mentions of the cities and civilians that the events of the game affects, as well as all these different factions residing on the grid, but the whole game takes place in this one building. You never see these cities outside of some blurry skylines, you never speak to any ordinary civilians, only a couple characters which represent the views of the factions, so I struggle to grow any attachment to the stakes at play. I would have preferred a story similar to Legacy or even Uprising, where the focus is on the characters and narrative, with the lore being a background, rather than the characters and narrative being a conduit for the lore. Overall, it is a really interesting and sometimes even really good entry in the Tron franchise. It offers a lot of unique material, and although I preferred the detective aspects in the first half more than the out there aspects in the latter half, which almost felt reminiscent of Akira in parts, it does a good enough job at transitioning from one to the other so as to not feel jarring. I know a lot of what I said sounded negative, but I would still definitely recommend playing it if you're either a fan of visual novels or Tron. But if you're neither, I'm not sure how much there is for you here. After Identity proved Bithell could be trusted with the Tron IP, Bithell pitched a follow-up. Okay, so, same deal, right? Choice-based visual actually, we were thinking of doing something a bit different. Oh, look at that, little guy's thinking. Well, I don't have all day, the new Indiana Jones just flopped like we planned, so shoot. Well, we were thinking... Wait, you planned for it to flop? Well, duh. You inflate the budget, you inflate the loss. Most of the budget surprisingly went into catering and advertising, but we literally owned those companies, so really we just paid ourselves. That way you can declare financial loss and pay the cast and crew much less, and then we can use the failure as leverage to use an AI replacement for Harrison Ford once he passes. Anyway, the pitch? Oh, right. Well, we were thinking of doing something a little more gameplay heavy, not a direct sequel, but a continuation of the events shown in Identity with a focus on action and traversal, as well as the story. So, what do you think? Oh, I actually don't give a shit, but, yeah, that sounds good. What do you need, like, 5 million? So, production started. With a team of 25 people and Evolver Digital's own subsidiary label intended for licensed IP indie games, Big Fan Games, publishing this game as a debut, Bithell Games began development. Bithell wanted to keep the rich narrative of Identity while evolving the gameplay into an isometric fighter closer in style to Hades. I don't think I was the only person to have an issue with Identity not fully justifying its stakes by being confined to one building, so the maps in this game are quite big and varied, with one even being a pretty open map of a city on the art grid where you spend a good amount of time. This really helped me naturally care about the grid, as well as the dynamic between core and the automata, since I'm actually seeing it happen instead of just being told about it. Although now I am getting ahead of myself, so first let's talk about the story. In Catalyst, you play as Exo, a courier program operating in the Vertical Slice, which is the capital city of the art grid. She's making a delivery when, suddenly, the package explodes and kills her. This package contained a glitch which sticks Exo in a time loop that you'll need to use to complete levels. You are captured by Core and made to play in the games by a core leader named Con. However, a green-haired fella named Vega knows about your looping condition and helps you escape the games by telling you to steal Con's light cycle baton and taking advantage of a crack in the walls of the arena, kind of exactly like what happened in the original film. After escaping the arena, you go back to Vertical Slice, where Core is hunting you down. You meet with my goat, Query, who upgrades your disc to be undetected as an escapee by Core, and then you break into their base to steal some code for the automata, in return for safe passage out of the city. However, in their desperation for peace between Core and automata, their leader strikes a deal with Con and sabotages you. After capturing you, Con takes you to his leader Tacitus, who has been experimenting on programs to help survive the grid's destruction, as set up in Identity. You manage to break free and find a light jet so Exo can travel to the Outlands and locate the source of the glitch. Before she can reach the Outlands, Exo crash lands at the Null Refinery, where she needs to get some code from various helpers so she can take a boat to the Outlands. Once in the Outlands, Exo finds Con already waiting for her, and she manages to narrowly escape him, finding Oracle. Oracle explains that she was the owner of the package that exploded. She wanted to harness the power of the time loop to buy the grid more time before it was destroyed. To help you, she created these machines called entanglers, which are basically checkpoints that allow you to not have to restart a loop from the very beginning of the level. And then she tells you to round up Sierra and Spectre, the leaders of the automata and the reset, to help begin creating this revolution. You'll recognize Sierra as the guy I kept imprisoned at the repository in Identity, while the reset are an anti-core resistance group based in the Outlands. You follow their tracks but find them just as Con does, and in his rage he derezzes them both and turns to you, suggesting that if he derezzes you, you might not loop back. So very quickly he disarms you and kills you, and then the game ends. Wait, what? What a fucking cliffhanger. What do you mean the game ends? What the fuck kind of ending? Oh, cool. You got me. You slick son of a bitch, you got me good. So instead of looping back to the start of the level, you actually loop back to the beginning of the game, now equipped with the ability to use the entanglers to jump between all the different levels whenever you want. You round up all the friends you've made throughout the game, from factions like Automata and Reset, to characters like Vega, Query and Hori to defeat Core and save the art grid. You even get to meet and save Cass from imprisonment, which was cool. This all culminates in a pretty cool third act where Reset are by your side, taking out big groups of core enemies in the Outlands, and you have to fight and eventually derez Con. I actually thought Con was quite a tragic character, since he always feels like he's only a few steps away from seeing through his indoctrination, and yet his pride and false sense of loyalty stops him at every turn, forcing your hand despite Exo trying really hard to convince him. This game does end on a cliffhanger, with the resistance fully formed and ready to try and save the art grid. But I did like the ending, as it does feel like a natural place to end this story and lead into a sequel. I probably should have said this in the intro, but due to this game not actually doing that well, a large chunk of Bithell's staff had to be let go, so I'm not sure if we're going to get a sequel, but it does still feel like a complete narrative. Honestly, I really love this game. It's infinitely better than Evolution and about on par, if not only slightly beneath 2.0. As I alluded to before, this game addresses a lot of the issues I had with Identity. Through exploring various locations on the grid and talking to different characters, you naturally grow an attachment to the grid and therefore the stakes. One thing that added a lot of depth to the world was that you talk to a bunch of people within the same faction but with different opinions, which just makes this grid and the programs that live in it so much more believable. The writing is also a lot better this time around, with the more grandiose story allowing for scenarios that really flesh characters out. My favourite example of this was Con. Although he's a bastard throughout the whole game, as I said before, you can tell from the very start that he isn't just being evil for the sake of being evil. He genuinely sees something special in Exo and wants her to join a cause he genuinely believes is right. This culminated in the ending where you kill him, but I honestly felt really conflicted about doing so. It did feel really tragic because he always felt like he was so close to opening his eyes and joining the revolution, but by the end he was just too far gone. Other than the game being shorter than I would have liked it to be, the only real critique I have is actually regarding the main narrative gimmick, the loot mechanic. At the end of the day, it feels like just that. A gimmick. In the first half of the game, it's mainly only used interestingly when talking to people about it and having to tell them that it's like the 5th time you've had that conversation. Other than that, I didn't find myself using it as much as I thought I would. It's mainly used when you get a new mission that happens to be closer to the start of the loop. I also played the game on the easiest difficulty for the sake of completing it in time to write this, so I would have probably needed it more if I played on a harder difficulty, but at that point, how is it different to your average respawn checkpoint? It is integrated a little better in the second half of the game once the entanglers become part of the story, but by that point it does get a bit tedious having to jump back and forth between maps you've already played. Although I would have preferred the second half to let us travel to even more new locations on the art grid, I didn't mind the backtracking too much since I understand this game is quite low budget and there is a much quicker pace to the story once the agency ramps up. Overall, I went into this game quite worried, as I'm not the biggest fan of isometric fighting games, and I was scared I would only like it for it being set in the Tron universe, but I was pleasantly surprised by just how much I enjoyed it. The story is great and really reminiscent of Uprising, and the gameplay and style really grew on me throughout the playthrough. It's short and varied enough that it's actually the thing I'm most excited to revisit on a harder difficulty once I wrap this video up, as I really haven't stopped thinking about it. I would 100% recommend you play this, even if you're not a fan of the genre, considering I wasn't. Also, I played this on my PC, but the whole time I was thinking that this would be the perfect Switch or Steam Deck game, so if you have those, I would really recommend playing it there. Wow, that's it. That's everything. I guess I have to actually go outside now. I started making this video at the end of July, and now it's October. Ares is releasing in just a couple of days. I mean, after 15 years of waiting, I don't really know how to process that. 43 years ago, this all started as one man's passion project. Since then, not only has that project become a cult classic, but it's managed to get 2 sequels, a spin-off show, 2 comic book stories, as well as comic and novelized adaptations, 4 video games with unique stories, and a dedicated fan base that has kept that one man's vision alive. I think what always made Tron unique when compared to other franchises was just how forward-thinking it was, and how being niche made it practically impossible for it to ever become oversaturated. It was an idea so ahead of its time that it can only grow in relevance as time goes on. And the great thing is that every entry is so wildly different. The Ghost in the Machine has nothing in common to Catalyst. Identity is so different to Legacy. It's such a great sandbox for storytelling because it's not anchored down by a necessity to fit into any specific mold. There's a lot of chatter and speculation around Disney's relationship with Tron as a franchise, but the most important thing is that time and time again, it has brought together this tight-knit community of fans who use these films, games, and comics as a vehicle to dream bigger.
I think I was 11 when the first film came out. I saw it and it absolutely blew my mind. It was like nothing I had seen before. And I was, 6, 7 years old when the first Star Wars came out. So I was very versed in the era of that era of science fiction, but Tron was something very different. It was always very computer oriented. So yeah, I was always very much a Tron fan from day one.
I am a Tron fan from basically pre-movie. I played the game before I saw the movie. I was an arcade rat back in the 80s, and I was pretty much the king of the game in my neighborhood. With the game, it was at a place called Pinball Plus in Burbank, California, a little hole-in-the-wall arcade that had about 25 machines maybe. My friends and I went in there when it first came out. There was a long line to play it. Once I finally got onto it, I was hooked. I went to a theater in North Hollywood and saw it at a late showing at I think it was about 9 o'clock at night. Absolutely loved the movie. Didn't realize the effect it would have on me at that point. I saw it a few more times after that. What it did for me was it stimulated sort of a creativity in me that I had not found before in my life. It was, it basically created a vision of what was possible for me.
The 20th anniversary DVD release came out in 2002. I bought that because I was a fan of the film. I watched it when I was a little kid. I didn't really remember it that well, so I was eager to get my hands on the DVD. So I bought that. On the DVD was an ad for something called Tron Killer App. That ad is what got me interested in the game. I was waiting for it. A particular standout for me was Tron Uprising. I loved that. I thought that Uprising was what Tron really should have been aiming for as a franchise. You know, like, that was excellent. That was great. And I wish we had more of it. I wish it hadn't been canceled and we got a season 2. I was so bummed out when it turned out that they weren't going to make any more episodes. I was,
I watched, okay, I remember I was like 5 years old when this happened, and my parents were trying to convince me to go watch Tron Legacy in the theater. And being like little kid that I was, for some reason I didn't want to go. I don't know why, but I didn't want to go. And my parents had to convince me. So I finally went, saw an IMAX 3D, was mind blown. And then the day after, Blockbuster was still open at this time, right? I go to Blockbuster, get Tron 82, watch it on repeat, and I never return it. In fact, I still, hold on, actually, I'm gonna show you guys something really cool here. In fact, I still have the Blockbuster case right here.
Whoa.
This one means a lot to me. This is the same Blockbuster DVD that I watched on repeat like thousands of times. Yeah. And yeah, I've been obsessed with Tron ever since.
I've been a Tron fan for about 15 years at this point, and that's thanks to Disney Channel. I would just watch Disney like any other kid, and they were airing promos like crazy. The visuals just captured me instantly. I had to get the DVD, I had to get the toys, I had the Light Cycle toy, the Clue one to be specific, Garrett and Olivia doing those fun quizzes on Disney Channel for 60 seconds. Those I have fond memories of as well. Now regarding the fandom, I got into the fandom around 7 years ago. The community was totally dead. There was only a few people around, and if there was not going to be anyone around making content or engaging with the community, then I wanted to be part of it. And over the years, we've just been building this community, and it feels like we've been building straight towards the release of Ares, which is just so amazing, and I'm glad for this outcome. Hopefully, the release of Tron Ares will bring an entirely new era of Tron fans to the community, and they will appreciate this movie just as we have.
It's rare. It's a niche. It's cyberpunk, you know, it's glowy lights and flashy objects, it's computer tech, but you know, I grew up as computers were just becoming fun. Tron hit me late. I think I had seen it on, you know, Sci-Fi Channel Saturday morning, whatever. I caught a couple minutes, was like, oh, that's neat, whatever, didn't think too much. I went to school and I was studying film, and I was studying how to make lightsaber glow effects before that was nearly as common as it is now. I was using broomsticks with glow sticks just to see if I could make something out of it. What jumped out to me when I saw something of Tron in school, I think it was in one of my textbooks, they were rotoscoping it by hand. These insane people rotoed a suit of circuitry, shot by shot by shot. When I found out about that, I happened to be going home for the weekend, and I remember going into my local Blockbuster and running in with, you know, whatever money I had on me, and there was the Tron anniversary DVD. Not only did I eat up the movie, like it was, the time was right. It was time for me to get into Tron. That's what happened. But the bonus features were all about that rotoscoping process. We're talking 7 layers per program per shot. Like, wow. I mean, even if you outsource it, still there's someone doing it. Like, that's insane. No wonder no one ever did this again, and no one has done it since. Thank God for EL Wire and what that has done for Legacy and beyond. But
I really liked the idea of a world existing in a computer which you can access, because it kind of resonates with me as a kid. When I was bullied at school, I have dealt with people who acted fake towards me, people who looked down on me. As a coping mechanism back then, I kind of retreated myself into my own world, a little world of my own making. Just a bubble where nobody could like really hurt you or anything. The idea of just another world existing somewhere which you can access is pretty comforting for me. What I like about Tron itself is its whole futuristic aesthetic. I love the fashion, especially for the women. There's something very 2010s for it. I mean, what we see from the trailers, there's apparently going to be a sun in the Dillinger grid or the Encom grid. I don't know, but now we've got a sun there, so if it was possible, I would move my ass there.
I think I was on Netflix, and I just happened to stumble across Tron Legacy. And at first I thought, it's just like from the poster, it just seemed like a movie with cool flashy lights. How good can it really be? So I watched it, and it was absolutely fantastic. It's still one of my favorite movies to this day. So after that, I watched the original Tron, which surprised me equally as much by how good it was and how revolutionary it was. And after that, it was I watched Uprising, which was insane. I'm still pissed they haven't made a second season of Uprising. So the main reason I really like Tron is of course it's the visuals and the music, but it's also because how forward-thinking the movies were. Tron really is relevant in today's context about how AI is rising so much in today's society. It's also just a really unique franchise in general. It's not about superheroes or space wizards. It's literally just about computers. I mean, obviously it's amazing just seeing the amount of love that these two movies and the show and the other stuff has gotten. It's really heartwarming, and it's really nice to see this tight-knit community talk about their favorite stuff in these movies and this overall franchise.
Dude, Tron Legacy and Tron itself has been a thing I've liked for years. But it's just sadly, for me personally, it's just more for the visuals than everything else that the movie's about. But it's still a really top tier film that honestly, what it's like to be a Tron fan is just to simply watch and enjoy and understand how things between different worlds kind of meet together. I always thought that'd be really cool. As always, Tron lives.
Like I said, this video has taken so long to make. I've never really done anything quite like this, and I honestly doubted I would even finish this on time. But this is something I'm so passionate about that it was constantly fun and rewarding throughout. There's a lot of shaky discourse around Ares for various reasons that I'm going to explore once the film comes out and I make my video on that, but needless to say, I cannot wait to see it. Seriously, even if you watched all of this having never interacted with anything Tron, go check out everything I talked about, because there is so much passion and creativity on display in everything here, and it truly deserves all the love it can get. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you to everyone who helped out and even took time out of their days to let me interview them. This has been such a fun project to immerse myself into, and to be honest, I'm kind of sad it's over. But with that, end of line.
I was falling through the sky on the waves of time for 1 billion miles. In the wildest of my dreams, I was going down the rabbit hole to the other side. Yeah. I kept on running into the wild. It made me feel just like a child, like hyperspace and time. Had to go down the rabbit hole to the other side. Oh yeah, to the other side. Oh yeah, down the rabbit hole. In my room, all by myself, I had a lucid dream of somebody else who came into my life to take me down the rabbit hole to the